All right, my friends. Welcome back to All Cars. I am John, and it is time for another Motorweek retro review reaction. This week it is the 1995 Nissan Sentra GXE. Now, you know, when I saw a mid-90s Econo box, I had to do it. And the fact is, I really like this car. So I'm looking forward to taking little trip down memory lane about 30 years and reminiscing about this one a little bit with you. So as always, make yourself comfortable with me. Grab a beverage of choice. Today we have Gatorade. And let's see what Motorweek said about them when they were brand new.
Motorweek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com.
Small cars sell in big numbers, sometimes with lots of fanfare like the Honda Civic or Ford Escort, and sometimes in a quieter but equally successful manner, like the subject of this week's road test by request, the Nissan Sentra. While it hasn't enjoyed the widespread publicity of some small cars, it has enjoyed widespread sales. In fact, it frequently matches or beats many more well-known subcompact competitors in the sales charts. So if you're Nissan, what do you do to maintain that kind of success? Well, you build a better Sentra. It is if it improves on the previous Sentra's virtues of performance, value, and style. Now, we love the last Sentra's big car on a small chassis lines and hope for more of the same this time. But Nissan opted for a more generic aero look, one that, while certainly handsome, won't help the Sentra stand out in the crowded small car segment.
Go back just a little bit there so we can see it. The previous Sentra, I've liked the Sentra. I have. When it was more square, and then that last previous generation. And then this one, gosh, I thought it was pretty solid compared to the big guys, the big boys like the Honda Civic. The problem is it did do what was so common in the 90s, which was to become just a little too smooth and a little too aero, a little too, I've said it before, melted soap in the sun. And some cars did it better than others. The 90s Toyota Camry, did it okay. The Honda Civic, I felt, did it okay. This didn't pull it off with quite as much style. That being said, I do think this is a pretty good looking car. I don't think it's overly handsome. I don't want to oversell how much I like it. It is a solid performer, though. It's just kind of homey.
Small car segment, but extending the sedan's wheelbase by over 4 inches and dropping the two-door model completely will expand the Sentra's appeal to buyers who want more room in a subcompact package.
And I love the rear end of this car. It is one of the most memorable parts of the car to me. The front is kind of anonymous. It could be a lot of different things, but the back, I thought this was pretty distinctive. They didn't go too thin and too delicate, too, if you'll excuse me, feminine on the lines there. They rounded it and they smoothed it and they aeroed it up, but I think it's rather distinctive looking. I really do. I take issue with what they said about getting rid of the two-door model. That expands its appeal. Not really, not if you're trying to sell Sentras. Giving people more options gives people, well, more options, right? But they went on to make it its own thing with its own distinct style.
And an extra 3.5 cubic feet certainly qualifies as more. But that's not the only change to the Sentra's well-equipped interior. A slick new instrument panel replaces last year's flat dash, bringing better organization to all controls and providing the safety of standard dual airbags. Gauges are large and clear, though our GXE grade test car's lack of a tachometer is an unfortunate omission. We've long praised the Sentra's firm seats for having more support than the average small car, and the latest model continues that trend. It also offers a standard tilt steering column and height-adjustable seatbelt anchors. Once seated, you're within perfect reach of both the ventilation system's large rotary dials and our car's competent cassette stereo and its well-organized buttons and knobs. There's also a handy cup holder and plenty of interior storage. Sentra rear seat legroom has increased by 1.5 inches, while the rear headroom remains unchanged, but it's still one of the most generous in its class. Split fold-down seatbacks are standard in GXE and GLE models. And much appreciated since trunk room has actually shrunk by a full cubic foot, but stands at a still respectable 10.7. While there's less out back...
Okay, before they go on to the engine, let's talk about that interior real quick. I mean, what do you say? If you were to pick like a generic 90s econo box interior, it would be this or maybe a Mitsubishi. I don't know. It's or an Isuzu. There's nothing fundamentally wrong here. Like the seats look comfortable, and as I recall they were. The backseat room is good. The headroom was good. Up front, you remembering you're buying a small car built to a price point, right? There's nothing fundamentally wrong there. In fact, the tilt steering wheel is nice. That would have been an easy place to save some money. And in some angles, it looked like there was a shade difference between the upper and lower dash there. I'm not sure that was on purpose. Controls, let's talk about that. The HVAC, big knobs, fine. Radio, some of the bass and the treble there, the little knobs are a little tiny, but fundamentally fine and similar to what other contemporaries would have been doing. The gauges were sparse. There's just no way around that. There's not much there. That was a boring gauge cluster, even if it's easy to read. If you're going to do that, why not have a big one in the middle, right? And then put the smaller gauges on either side. That was value engineered. And yeah, that's just that is 70s econobox thinking to me. You know, we're going to offer a trim line with a tachometer, but instead of designing another one for the lower end, we're just going to take it away and fill that in with something else. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on how they actually came about that, but the instrument cluster, boring. And what really jumped out at me was the plastics. A couple of different areas. The fit and finish on a lot of the seams seemed really inconsistent. Like one was really tight, but one was kind of wide. The airbag cover actually looked like it had a little bit of a level difference there. The plastic around the center stack, that was cheap black plastic. That really, really was. And I will never not complain about rubber boots on gear shifters. Cheap, functional, ugly. And to make your wheelbase 4 inches longer and reduce the size of your trunk, what were they thinking? I just, again, functionally, if you were in the market at the moment, this probably presented very nice at the dealership. Hindsight is a little 20/20.
The engine bay has seen a noticeable increase. The 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine now produces 115 horsepower and a more accessible 108 pound-feet of torque thanks to an extensive program of refinements. Regrettably, the wonderful 140 horsepower engine of last year's SER grade coupe is no longer available. Transmission choices remain unchanged, however, a 5-speed manual like our test cars or an optional 4-speed automatic. 115 horses and a manual got us to 60 in a very quick for its class 8.8 seconds. The quarter mile ended in 16.7 seconds at 87 miles per hour. Power was strong off the line, but expectedly concentrated in the mid-range. The smooth throttle response and accurate shifter made it easy to exploit. while the adaptation of the larger Maxima's multi-link beam rear suspension to the Sentra platform produced all-around improvements in handling and grip. Even high-speed emergency maneuvers on a very cold winter test track didn't faze the Sentra. Braking, however, suffered in the cold, with a long average distance from 60 of 137 feet. Warmer weather and the GXE's optional anti-lock brakes would have helped reduce the frequent lockup and improve stability.
Okay. Wow. So let's dive in there. I don't have a problem with the engine. Gosh, don't you miss hearing about cars with 1.6 liters that aren't turbocharged or 3-cylinder? I mean, maybe it is those rose-colored glasses again. You know what I mean? If you're of an age, I just miss the simplicity of a good, well-engineered overhead cam 4-cylinder. And like, gosh darn, we can get 115 horsepower out of it. Good. That sounds great to me. Now let's build it light so it still performs. And it does still perform pretty well. I question why Motorweek did the slow motion through the slalom, because that made the car look far more dramatic in what it was doing than it did at full speed. In the slow motion, it looked like it squatted entirely down on that outside front tire. But in full speed, it looked controlled. It really did. It looked nice. Not offering the more powerful engine, knowing that they were coming out with a 2-door model instead of just an SER version of the Sentra, right? But why not build the sporty version of this? Why not offer it when you come out? I just think they missed an opportunity to have an SER level for the 4-door, a sporty little 4-door rocket. Braking, extremely disappointing. They can excuse it to say you can get the optional anti-lock brakes, and we haven't talked about price yet, and that the track was cold. But if you know what, if you're on the interstate and you're slamming on the brakes, you don't care about any of that. 137 is a little long. That lockup, if you know what you're doing, and I don't think most drivers do, it was controllable, but you're doing the pumping on the brakes. So it remained controllable, but overall, I don't know. We've seen a lot better from the 90s.
Out on the road, however, there were no problems in any weather. The Sentra's long wheelbase delivered a substantial improvement in ride quality. Fuel economy is also up. Our GXE manual is now EPA rated at 30 city and 40 highway. We averaged an excellent 36 miles per gallon on our mixed test loop. Increases in horsepower, interior space, and fuel economy usually also mean an increase in price. Well, those numbers aren't yet available, but we estimate that 95 Sentra 4-doors will start at a still reasonable $11,000. A well-equipped GXE like our test car will probably go for about $13,500. You'll get more safety features for your money with the new Sentra, including dual airbags, available anti-lock brakes on top models, and 1997 side impact protection. Overall, we like the newest Nissan Sentra very much. While it may still have a few small glitches, it improves on the previous car in almost every area. In order to maintain the success of its smallest model, Nissan had to build a better Sentra, and they did. The 1995 Nissan Sentra may not gather any more publicity than its predecessor, but to the people that count, the car buyers, it will be a very popular machine. That's a trade-off that the folks at Nissan can surely live with.
So, that was super short. My experience with this car was when it came out, when it was new. And it was much like how they're driving it here. I think it was the fall, because I remember spending a little time with it, and it was much like this, much like 2-lane little roads, you know, in the country, not out in the middle of nowhere, but just in the country, and being able to just be with the car. I want to say I was riding with or driving with somebody, but that's not important. I can nitpick this car a lot, and I will. But what I remember about this car was it was really pleasant. Not nice, not, oh my gosh, this has changed my opinion of Nissan forever, but just like nice. This is a car you can get in, and if you cut away the noise of other people's expectations or trying to keep up with the Joneses, or, is that Civic a tenth of a second faster or things like that, you ended up with a car that was just nice to live with overall. And it's because it rode really well. It was really comfortable, as I recall. It was relatively refined, and that's fantastic gas mileage. Let's not miss that. That's fantastic. And you ended up with just a really good value overall. And if you bought the car and you were the type of person to be like, I've bought this car and it's a good value and it holds up for a long time and I am happy with it, then it's a wonderful car. And I remember it rather fondly from that point of view. Now, when you start watching videos like this, or you start looking back, or you start thinking about, hey, I loved the Escort. The Honda Civic was fantastic. And how would anyone drive this and a Saturn and think this was the better car? Not less expensive. The Saturn was more expensive. But this was nowhere near as emotive. I guess what I'm trying to say is this car sparked a reassuring feeling in me, a feeling that I can just be happy because this is just a small, nice car. It's fine. But as you look back and you think about, heck, the Mazdas, the Volkswagen Golf, I hesitate to say the Corolla, but it was a better car. Then all of a sudden, this falls off the list relatively quickly. And it could be because the styling was It could be the interior. It could be any number of things. Unless you got a great deal at the dealership, right? There's a number of cars I would choose over it. But me personally, I just remember I liked the car. It was fine. Would I choose it number one? In 1995, if somebody handed me a stack of $14,000 and said, go buy yourself a small car, I'd drive them all just for the heck of it. But it would be hard to say this would be the one I would bring home. Because fundamentally, I think the Civic was better. The Corolla, more reliable. The Escort, I just think was better packaging, generally speaking. And the Saturn, well, if you've ever watched the channel, you know how I feel about Saturn. So I guess that's it for today. Feels very short today on this one, but a very boring, generic Nissan of the 90s, where I think they went a little too far in the boring and generic. And I question their trim line, engine choices, not having a two-door, moving to a different model, moving the SER over there. Feels like they were making a lot of bad choices around this, and I'm not sure what their end goal was. I guess we can say it didn't pay out that well for them. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts below. And I need to catch up on some of these retro reviews, by the way, so I'm throwing it out there. I've got a few on a list here, but if you've seen some you'd like to see me do, I know that one from the Infiniti Q45 recently came up. Just let me know below. Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate you again.